So welcome everyone, and anyone watching from the slides in the background, welcome as well. For everyone in the room, this talk will be recorded, and as well as the Q&A afterwards. It'll be available after the meeting through the competitions page that you've hopefully seen the application for. The other point just to mention on this slide, if you've got any questions about the competition process that are very general, there's also other resources available for you online as well. My name's Callum Stirling, so I'll be one of the people speaking to you today about this briefing. Just to go through a very quick overview of the day. Well, the first one we've done, you've arrived, which is good. Good to see a very full room. We'll have a very brief welcome and introduction that covers things from a strategic point of view. We have Roger McKinlay and Tom Scott from DSIT to speak to that. And then we'll get into the briefing in anger, followed by Q&A. After the Q&A, that's when the recording will stop. And then we'll have an opportunity for some, I guess, we'll call it unstructured discussion around this and what the kind of projects you're looking at doing, and you feel free to mingle and discuss on your tables during that. We'll then break for lunch. After lunch, we'll have a applicant surgery. So this is kind of any questions you have that might be a bit more sensitive that you may want to discuss with us separately and not answer in the Q&A. There's an opportunity for you to do so then. And then we're free to end the day, and hopefully it isn't too onerous and you enjoy yourselves. So with that, I will welcome Roger McKinlay up to the stage.
Thanks very much, Callum. Roger McKinlay, the Challenge Director in Innovate UK. I know most of you, I think. We used to, and I said, welcome to the applicant briefing. We used to call these cultivation events, but cultivation event made it sound like something rather unpleasant you might find growing in a Petri dish. So we've dropped that name. Callum, you've met. Marika, my deputy, is here as well. If you don't know what Marika does, think of a Chris Jones upgrade, okay? And so Marika is doing the job Chris did for many years and has been leading on this. People who know what they're talking about are going to talk to you today, so I'll say something different. I'll say things people can't say, okay? And that includes Rachel and her team from DSIT, who I'm delighted here. We've got some other government departments here as well. So as a bit of arm's length from government, let me put this perspective on it. We are desperate to continue the great work of the National Quantum Programme and continue to fund the development of particularly the quantum sensor technology is relevant today over the coming years. And we're at one of those not unusual stages where we can say very little bit about the future because it's not yet determined in terms of numbers and dates and so on. But that is the whole ambition of today. Now, when life becomes clearer, we will want to get spending as quickly as possible. And the reason this is called a primer is it will enable us, when funding does become available, to be able to turn on projects very, very rapidly without a competition. So look at it that way round. All of today we're going to be talking about the competition we've called because we can't talk about the future. But the intent here is to use this competition and the projects we select and the successful projects come out to be able to, as rapidly as we can, go on to fund these maturing products in this area. And that's the other point absolutely to stress at the top, the start, is we fund a lot of things along the pipe, but we really are with this particular competition, Contracts for Innovation, I call it SBRI, you probably still do, but remember that is really aimed at maturing ideas which are that bit closer to being real products with real customers and real applications. So this is fitting in very well with what is still a grand ambition, but we have to go through the nuts and bolts and get absolute clarity at this stage. So please just fire as many questions as possible. I think the competition brief was excellent and what's come out. And so hopefully this is just adding clarity on top of that. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. I'm Tom Scott. I'm one of the policy leads in DSIT in the Office of Quantum. I'm going to just give, if the clicker works, a very quick sort of overview of the current sort of policy priorities within DSIT and talk about how that relates to the brief and the competition and the wider programme. And give a bit more information about the sort of onward process that Roger's alluded to for the sort of longer term vision for the programme. So just to recap quickly, lots of you will already know this. I know lots of you have been engaged with the programme for a long time. But looking back, the first 10 years of the national programme have been a great success. The government has invested just over £1 billion in the programme to deliver the hubs, the National Quantum Computing Centre, support for business through Innovate UK, and various other initiatives to grow the sector that we have today. And I think the fact that we almost need a bigger room for all of you here today is a really great testimony to that first phase of the programme. And the UK is really good at this. So, second clicker, look at that. And this one's got a laser as well. The UK is really good at this. The programme has delivered a genuinely world-leading ecosystem. We top the leaderboards for skills, investment, number of companies, and we have capability across the full spectrum of quantum technologies, which I think is quite rare when you compare to the ecosystems of other nations as well. But it's important to think about what happens next. So the first 10 years of the programme concluded in 2024. This year is a bridging year. So as Roger said, we're in the process of a spending review at the moment, and we've only been able to have a sort of 1-year budget for planning for this year. However, as we look forward, we would like to be able to make longer-term commitments and run longer-term activities to deliver on the next phase of the programme and through the missions. So the National Quantum Strategy was published by the previous government. This is still a priority for the new government. Quantum remains a priority for the UK. And we are looking to deliver on that ambition over the next 10 years. The missions will be a central pillar of that approach. So we have 5 quantum missions, which I will speak to briefly in a second, and we will be delivering activities aligned to the missions, such as the one that we're here today to discuss, and also supporting other areas such as skills, infrastructure, and international partnerships. And the missions will represent a step change in how government is supporting the sector. So Roger's alluded to the fact that we're looking to really focus on product now and procurement, and that is exactly what we're trying to achieve through the next phase of the programme. So we've supported the development of a nascent ecosystem, and now we're really looking to accelerate towards commercialisation and adoption in the areas that have been identified through the missions. However, we are currently in a spending review, and I'll talk a bit about what that process looks like in a second. And so we're unable to sort of give clarity on what the scale of the programme will look like at this stage. But we as the quantum team in DSIT have massive aspirations for the sector. So we are making the case for an ambitious programme, both within DSIT and to the Treasury as well. The 5 missions, some of you will probably be relatively familiar with these. We recognise that they are ambitious. These are published online. If the text is too small, please have a look. The link's in the competition brief. These are all very ambitious. We recognise that, but the whole point of a mission is to be ambitious. And we really think these are the key areas of opportunity for the UK. And they are essentially the long-term objectives we're trying to deliver through the programme to deliver sort of societal and economic benefit. So we have a mission on computing, a mission on quantum networking, but the 3 that are probably of most interest to this group are the 3 that are in relevance to the brief today. And I'll talk a bit more about these now. So the quantum sensing for healthcare mission is designed at realising benefits to the NHS through quantum sensors by 2030. We recognise this is super ambitious. Department of Health will keep us honest on that as well. And we've spoken to the community, and we know that this mission will only be successful if it's based around areas of pressing clinical need. the health system is only going to adopt things that are critical and that will present a step change in their ability to deliver healthcare. So we've been working with Department for Health and wider parts of the health system and the existing hubs as well to establish what are those areas of clinical need and how do you bridge the gap between the quantum community and the healthcare community to ensure that innovations can be adopted as sort of soon as possible into the health system. PNT, this is about getting quantum-enabled navigation systems onto aircraft. Again, this is about building capability in the UK. And we've been working really closely with the Ministry of Defence and DSIT on the development of this mission. However, we know that there are massive market opportunities outside of the defence sector that we are looking to be able to service through the PNT mission. And there's some indication of the types of things we'll be focusing on the slide. And mission 5, this is about network sensing. And the 3 priority themes we have identified are on the left. And this is very much about stimulating private sector activity through demonstration and testing type activities in the areas of surveying, standoff gas sensing, and distributed sensing in challenging environments. And we've chosen these 3 areas because we feel that there is a lot of cross-CNI sectoral opportunity for these 3 commercialisation themes. I wanted just to touch on the wider government context. We are about to publish an industrial strategy. This was a key manifesto pledge from the Labour government. The industrial strategy is essentially one of the central vehicles through which the government will be delivering its #1 mission of growth. This is a 10-year plan and will basically focus on how do you galvanise and accelerate growth in priority industry sectors in the UK. And there are 8 priority sectors. Digital and technologies is one of those, and there are 7 others such as financial services, defence, advanced manufacturing, and so on. Quantum is going to play a massive part in 2 ways in this broader strategy. One, as a key driver of growth within the digital and tech sector itself, but also as a productivity enabler in other sectors. So quantum is a platform technology and will be deployed in other sectors to drive growth. And we are making sure that the sort of other government departments that are involved in developing this strategy are aware of that opportunity. We also have a spending review, which Roger touched on, and I thought I would just give a bit of an indication of what the forward look process for that is. However, I'll caveat by saying that this is still rather uncertain, and so please bear that in mind. So there's going to be a spending review announcement shortly. All departments will be assigned a headline budget for their spend over the next 3 years. Following that process, each department will go through an allocations process. This is where we will be working internally with other bits of DSIT and DSIT ministers to establish how money should be allocated to different areas of DSIT policy priority. So that's quantum being one of them, but also things like artificial intelligence, R&D, infrastructure, telecoms, etc. Later this year, we should have confirmation of what the allocations process has delivered for quantum, and that will allow us to start to plan what the next phase of the programme will look like in detail. So we have some provisional plans, which we're hoping to share with you for each of the missions. However, until we know what the specific envelope for quantum is for the next financial year and onwards, we're unable to plan in detail. And so this will be the point that we'll be able to do that. And so with that in mind, and we will be sharing the plans with you after this session today, it's really important for us to understand which bits of the plans are most important to this group. So we will not be able to fund everything that's in the plans. They are written at a high ambition, but we need to understand from the community and from industry and from academia which are the most important bits of these plans for you that will stimulate private sector activity and academic growth. And that will help us to prioritise in this process. And that will be in collaboration with UKRI, so with Marika and Roger and different bits of other councils. In parallel, we have these priming activities. So Roger's mentioned the reason why we have short-term competitions at the moment. But given that we are looking at a multi-year spending review, so that is a spending review that will set the budgets for the next 3 years, we will then be able to roll out longer-term activities and hopefully be able to scale up the level of investment that we are deploying into the ecosystem. Again, I'll caveat that by saying that we can't say anything about the scale of investment that we're talking about at the moment. We are making a strong case to the Treasury for the need to be ambitious. We have a great opportunity here in the UK. We have an amazing ecosystem. And the international competition is really fierce. And we're making that point internally. And we see a massive opportunity to capitalise on the sort of nascent sector that we have here in the UK. I think that's me done. I'll be around for Q&A afterwards. Some of the Office of Quantum team are here. We have individual policy leads responsible for the health mission, PNT, and sensing. So if you would like to chat to them, please do after the Q&A as well.
So thank you to Tom and Roger for that. Just to mention, Tom mentioned the mission plans. We expect to be sharing those through the competition brief site. So for both people online and people in the room, you should be able to access those fairly shortly. We can't confirm exact timelines on that just yet. But before the competition closes is the key bit. For now, we are finished with the kind of the strategic level discussion. We'll be now focused on the nuts and bolts of this competition, both from the sense of the scope and the summary of what we're talking about, but then also actually how the process works, because some of you may not be familiar with that or familiar with the Contracts for Innovation product. For that, there'll be 4 of us coming up on stage. So Stephanie and Ellie will be talking on the process side of things and the competitions team. I will be talking through the scope of the competition as one of the innovation leads from the quantum team. And then we also have Tom from the Contracts for Innovation team as well to discuss that. So just a very brief, to go through the briefing overview, we'll talk through the key bit for you guys, I expect, will be the deadlines and when you need to have things done by. Then, as I said, we'll go through the scope and the summary and the eligibility, and then through various funding rules and how the system works and a few other things we'll discuss. And then we'll end with a Q&A. And this is the opportunity to ask anything that you're happy to go out into the room, happy to be on the recording, to have on either the competition or on the process. Great, so I'll just go very quickly through the key dates. I think I've stolen someone else's slides, so apology for that. But the competition, as we know, has opened. The deadline is the 2nd July. And the key thing to mention is 2nd July at 11 a.m., not 11:05, not 11:01. It cuts off and it shuts you out the system. So by 11 a.m. on the 2nd July, you will then find out if you've been successful after the assessment process by the 4th of August, with projects to start from the 1st September and to end this financial year. So I will very quickly go through the summary and the scope. So high level, as Roger's already mentioned, this is what we used to call SBRI projects. So it's now called Contracts for Innovation, but for those who are familiar with that product, it's the same thing. We have up to £40 million to invest in these projects. Individual projects up to £1.5 million, the low end of that being £500,000. That includes VAT. These projects have to be run within that 1st September, 31st of March window, so up to 7 months. Very specifically, we want these to be relevant to the 3 missions. So the 3 missions that Tom has just gone through, I won't labour that and go through them again, but the key application areas are discussed. Phase 1, which is what we're calling this priming activity, is what we're looking for, we're looking for you to come to us with a product concept, show us your roadmaps, and I'll go through some more detail, and show where you are. So what we're calling a maturity study, so we get a good idea of how mature the product you're proposing is. And again, it has to be related to those 3 missions. What will become phase 2, so this will be the post-priming activity. As we've already discussed, will be dependent on the budgets coming after this year, and what happens in the spending review process. So the scope. of this competition. So as I said, phase 1 is a maturity study. So we are really looking for a product or a service that could be sold eventually within quantum sensing and PNT. We want you to show where you are with this product, what the technology you developed so far, and how you're going to take it further. This needs to be in the context of the market you're selling to. So we really want those plans to be credible and actually that you can go through and show that you can go sell this product. Within that, there'll be different technical, commercial, and regulatory barriers. This will depend on, obviously, very different if you're doing something in PNT than you're doing in sensing. But you need to talk about what's relevant to your customers and your market and how you're going to address those in your roadmap. And all of this we encapsulate in 2 main deliverables we're looking for. So these will be one we're calling a product maturity roadmap. So these are all these plans and discussion we just mentioned, and a product performance report. And this is where you're demonstrating where the technology and where its status is. I'll go through those in more detail in a second. To highlight we're talking about the product and service, again, we want to be relevant to the missions. We want to prime these missions to get them going once the spending review process is finished. We want them to use what, as classic with most of our calls, second-generation quantum technologies. So I won't go into the definition, it's commonly accepted definition, but this is talking about things that use the control of quantum phenomena, but the fine control of quantum phenomena. If there is more detail on the competitions page, if you want to go through that, or we're welcome to discuss that after the session. The key bit that is different for this call, though, is that you don't necessarily have to have quantum integrated in your product now. It could be that you have a roadmap where quantum comes in, and that needs to be clear, and again, needs to be credible. We don't just want any product and then we might stick a quantum thing at the end. We want to clear where you're mapping your product and going, but that is also an eligible way of coming into this product and within the scope of this competition. That said, quantum-based solutions from the get-go also massively in scope of this competition. What isn't in scope, and this isn't an exhaustive list, there's more detail available in the competition brief, but the highlights I want to mention is we want mature solutions. We want technologies that have already kind of been somewhere down this path. This isn't for feasibility studies. We don't want people coming with just paper or desk-based studies where you're kind of saying, oh, this looks quite good, but we're not down there, we're not talking to our customers, we're not looking at the market and where we need to go. And that's the key bit, is we need to see those plans of what's coming up next. And I need to emphasize this again, it is a product roadmap we're looking for. We are not looking for, here's a technology, it's great, we don't know who we're going to sell it to yet. So to go through these 2 main deliverables, the product maturity plan, again, focus on the market knowledge, we want to see the maturity, but we want to see where it's going to go next. And this covers quite a wide range of things, the technical development you need to do, the investment needs, the funding you're going to need, again, going through those barriers, how you're going to address the specific barriers that you've identified on your proposal. We also want you to highlight what you'll be doing within phase 2. It's realistically, your plans may span quite a long time in the future. We want mature solutions, but different sectors have different timelines on these things. But within that, identify where you think you may go if a phase 2 competition materialises. On the other side of that is this product performance report. So this is the key bit. This is showing where you are now. And the key to say we are open within that scope of what you're doing to demonstrate it. So we've specified a test, a demonstration, could be an end user trial. When we said modelling, we want modelling isn't a simulation. We mean that in the sense of tied to some specific piece of hardware, but how that might change and how that might develop. But some key result. The key bit of this is, how are you going to go out to your customers and demonstrate you've got the confidence on your product roadmap and where you're going to go, that you're going to be able to meet the technical specifications that they need. On the other side of that, that is also showing to us, with these plans you've shown out for phase 2, how do we know your plans are credible? And this is the opportunity here to say, look, this is where we are technically, we know where we can go, and putting a stake in the ground and showing where you are on that roadmap. I think that's all I'm going to cover on the scope. That's the one that doesn't work. Oh, there we go. To specify, I think the last thing I want to cover before I hand over to the competitions team, we'll be talking about how in practice these phase 1 and 2 work. So we've discussed a lot about how this is to prime the next lot of activity that will come, well, that may come subject to the spending review process. So to be very clear, what you're applying for now in this competition, if you submit an application, is for phase 1 only. So what we've seen on the screen. It's an open competition. If you are funded, phase 1 starts on the 1st September, ends by the 31st of March. If you deliver on your project and subject to funding, there'll be a phase 2 competition. This will be a closed competition. So this is, the precise details are yet to be determined, as again, they are dependent on where we move in the next few months. But I've put up some indicative timelines. These are very subject to change, but the key point here is to say that we'll be doing the assessment process for the second competition after the close of the first one. So we don't expect you to be, if you get a phase 1 competition halfway through thinking, how do I write the brief for the next one? It's actually we will finish, we'll have these key deliverables, and those 2 deliverables I mentioned on the previous slide are how we'll be assessing for the closed competition going forward. So these 2 deliverables aren't just hit a flight of fancy, they are very key things that we'll be using to assess for the next phase. Then if you're funded, then it will be a longer term, hopefully, project. But again, the details we can't commit to at this stage. At this point, I will hand over to Contracts and Innovation. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around. So please welcome to the stage Tom.
Hello all, I'm Tom. Just before I get going, I'm having some difficulty with my hearing at the moment, and I have almost no concept of how loudly I'm talking. So if I'm shouting at you at any point today, or whispering, just do feel free to tell me. So I work in a really small team at Innovate UK that focuses on helping the public sector use procurement to both stimulate and benefit from research and innovation. Just as a bit of background, this mechanism was sort of developed by the European Commission back in the early 2000s, when we were all one big happy family. And it's been implemented in the UK since about 2008. And Innovate UK are the custodians of it. We both, as a tiny team, we help others in Innovate UK use the mechanism, but also other parts of the public sector. So DSTL and DASA, as well as the NHS, are big users of this mechanism themselves, and they do the operational delivery of those themselves. Essentially, we're focused on procurement as a lever because it's such a big part of the public sector budget. So it's about a third of public sector spending, around 350, 400 billion pounds per year goes through public sector procurement. And the idea is that if we can lever, some of that to, either do the adoption of or support the research and development, even 3 or 4% of that, we're sort of already doubling what the UK public sector spend on R&D, which is about 20 billion pounds a year, including UKRI's 9 billion-ish a year budget. So it's a massive lever to try and get some of that, adoption of innovation into the public sector. Hopefully, to support the public sector's efficiency or effectiveness. Fingers crossed both. So the idea is that we're helping government by supporting and government challenges or government missions that there aren't currently available solutions out there for. We also, as a separate note, we also focus on helping the adoption of that. That's a later stage. The idea behind Contracts for Innovation is to support the development of solutions and products which don't currently exist, which can meet public sector challenges, either operational or policy challenges. But it helps businesses by supporting the cost of those development at 100%, and also knowing that there's a market for this once that development has occurred. Over 100 public sector organisations have used the mechanism in the UK, and there's some independent evaluation that was done a couple of years ago that says, on average, there is an annual sales growth for successful businesses of about 30%. So when would we consider using Contracts for Innovation, in contrast to maybe a more grant-based approach? It is what we call pre-commercial procurement. So we want to do a check that there's no thing out there at a commercial stage that already exists. We don't want to develop, spend money, public sector money, on R&D to develop a solution when others already exist. So we do encourage, some pre-market engagement, market analysis to make sure, this is something new. It requires a challenge owner. That challenge owner doesn't necessarily have to be the end purchaser. Often it's not, but we require some sort of, as you can imagine, putting a business case together. We want to know that this development, this R&D money isn't being spent for no reason. Essentially, we want to know somebody is going to buy this, somebody is going to want to put this into action, to get that return on public sector investment. It's very much focused on outcome-driven solutions, so we do want to see challenges being solved, and the idea is to develop solution to those challenges. The challenges have to be well enough defined so that innovators like yourselves can develop solutions for them, but often we're trying to leave it quite open as to exactly how those challenges are solved. And it, as I say, is 100% funded R&D services, so it's a procurement contract essentially rather than a grant-based approach. So a few key features of contracts for innovation. This is in contrast to a more grant-based approach, if you're familiar with that. As I say, they are 100% funded contracts, so costs are covered at 100%, but profit is not allowed. Payment is made on the completion of milestones. I cannot overstate how important the milestone sections of the application is. Imagine you're paying somebody to build you an extension. You want, the milestones are based on certain deliverables, and it's exactly the same with this. So getting those milestones, right and simple, so that when it comes to the payment, those payments can be made based on deliverables that are clear, and then you can provide evidence for. That is really important, and the operational teams in Innovate UK spend a lot of time unpicking unclear milestones. So absolutely spend some extra time on those than you would in a grant-based approach. You can subcontract any specialist skills, or if there's a justifiable reason for that's absolutely fine. But also the lead applicant essentially remains accountable for the delivery. There are some IP clauses that are slightly different to the grant-based clauses. Essentially, all IP generated is owned by the successful applicant, the contractor, but there are free usage rights in there for the public sector funder. Essentially, that was put in there to ensure that because we're funding at 100%, unlike a grant-based approach, this is not classed as a subsidy. So this will count as trading income on your books, unlike a grant-based approach. So no matter the size of award of a contract for innovation, it's not a subsidy. And we very much, encourage companies to exploit that IP. Happy to have conversations with anybody worried about that. But we've had, I think, over 6,500 sort of contracts, in the UK since 2008, and we've never once had an organisation come back to us and say those IP clauses were detrimental to their growth. And we've got independent evidence to prove quite the opposite. It is open to all types and sizes of organisation. So unlike many of Innovate UK's programmes, it isn't just restricted to businesses or certain types of businesses. Academic organisations can apply, the third sector can apply, much like any other public sector procurement. It's absolutely open to companies not engaged, in the sector, as long as there's always, 50% R&D, 50% at least R&D, and all organisations have to demonstrate a route to market. A few, extra things to be aware of when you're applying to a contracts for innovation competition. As well as the technical criteria, it is assessed on the plans and ability to and potential for commercialization of the product or solution that you're proposing. It is a contract to deliver a specific outcome, so absolutely be sure you can deliver what's on the outcome, because those, as I said, the milestones are what you're paid against. Do familiarise yourself with the contract. The terms and conditions are not negotiable. As I say, we're very confident that they're, fair to both parties, and we need to keep them as they are for subsidy control reasons. So we don't negotiate on those terms and conditions. You must include VAT. My colleagues will tell you, the particular parts of the application process that you need to be aware of. But this is a R&D services contract, so VAT needs to be included. As I say, profit cannot be included in the application. Absolutely explain the problem that your project is looking to solve, who your target customers to be, particularly in relation to the commercial potential question. That's really useful to know. And we can't increase costs, once your application has been put in. I think that's it from me, but very happy to chat to anyone throughout the day if you've got further questions on the mechanism. I'll hand back over.
I'll pop up very briefly just to welcome Stephanie and Ellie from our competitions team to go through the eligibility criteria and some other process aspects as well. The entire session has been recorded. The slides and the recording will be made available after the session.
Good morning. I'm going to take you through the eligibility criteria for this competition. So your project must have total costs between 500,000 and 1.5 million. It must last up to 7 months and start by the 1st of September 2025 and end by the 31st of March 2026. Projects must always start on the 1st of the month, even if this is a non-working day, and this must be stated within your application. To lead a project, your organisation must be an organisation of any size, including those based in the EU, EEA or internationally. You must work alone or with the subcontracted skills and expertise of others from business, or research organisations, research and technology organisations, or the third sector, including charities, social enterprises and voluntary groups. Please be mindful that meeting the eligibility criteria for this competition doesn't mean that you'll automatically be awarded funding. Your application still needs to go through an assessment process. So now we'll look at the Innovation Funding Service. To start an application on the Innovation Funding Service, you will need to create an account. You must ensure you enter IFS as the correct organisation type. Businesses should use Companies House lookup functions so that we have your company number. Other organisations will need to use their information manually. You will need to enter it manually. Please note a registration number that does not relate to a fully registered UK business will not be eligible to apply for funding. So, for example, FC or BR prefixes, businesses registered in the Channel Islands, Isle of Man or Crown dependencies are not eligible for funding as UK businesses. For further information, please review our general guidance or reach out to our customer support team. You'll be asked a series of unscored questions initially, giving the details for your team and summary of your project. Then you will come to the main application questions. For this comp, we have 7 scored questions. Please take note of all the guidance given within each question, whether or not you can upload an appendix in support of your answer, and if so, how many pages the appendix should be. All guidance is in IFS. UK applicants are legally required to tell the government about acquisitions of certain entities in 17 sensitive areas of the economy. Quantum technologies fall into this question. There is a new question in the application process. It is an international collaboration question, and you must provide any details of any expected international collaboration or engagement. If you do not have any international collaboration, you must also put this in your answer. As this is a quantum competition, it is really important that you answer this question in detail and in full. These questions are not scored, but we require this information for our records. Each organisation in your application will be asked to complete a project impact questionnaire. This is only open to single applicants, so there's only one of you. These questions help Innovate UK to measure the impact our support has on organisations, businesses and individuals. The project impact questions are not scored and do not form any part of the assessment of your application. However, you will not be able to submit your application until you have completed this, so please take a look early on in your application. More information regarding the project impact can be found on our website or by following the links provided in this slide. I'm now going to hand over to Steph, who's going to talk to you about the finances. Thank you.
My name's Steph. I'm the competition manager for this particular competition. Not sure which one's working, so we'll just try both. There we go. So, in your project finances, there are 4 categories, and each organisation within an application must complete their own finance information. Obviously, this is single applicant only. So, your project costs, so this is where you add in your costs by category. Project location, so is where you enter your postcode for where most of the project work will take place. Your organisation, so please add the details of your organisation, including size, turnover, and number of employees, as is applicable. And your funding, you must declare any funding that you've received previously for the exact same project activities, as you cannot receive public funding for the same idea more than once. There we go. So everybody's favourite section, VAT. So within the finance section, you will be asked if you are VAT registered. So it can be useful to tick this box before entering your costs, because if you say yes, IFS will automatically add VAT onto all of your costs, which is handy. And if you enter your costs, including VAT, and then subsequently tick yes to the question, it will add on VAT again, which will skew your costs and take up more of your time. So please make sure that you complete this section correctly. If you are not VAT registered, then you can answer no here and insert your costs without VAT. Just note that if you say no, you will not be able to increase invoice values to cover VAT later on. So, moving on to the project cost summary. So once you've inputted all of your costs, you must ensure that your overall total in the summary section fits the eligibility criteria for the competition. And does not exceed any maximum limits as stated in the competition brief. Subcontractors, so please remember that in a contracts for innovation project, you can subcontract out elements of the work. Any subcontractor costs should be included in this cost category within finances. You will need to justify who, why, and what you need them for, both here and in your application. Very important. And if you're using a parent or sister company, please ensure that you list everything at cost and do not include profit. So other costs, there may also be other costs for your project that do not fit under any other cost categories. So you should list these out in the other cost section. So these could be, for example, training directly attributable to the project, licensing of new technologies, all of that fun stuff. And there is guidance on IFS about what you can include in this section. If you are unsure, please do not hesitate to contact us. Customer support are available to help with those questions, and please just ensure that there's no double counting and all costs are justified. So payment milestones, another really important section. So in the finance section, you will need to include your payment milestones. So enter each milestone and deliverable information. Where appropriate, link the milestone with a payment request as well. So these milestones can mark the completion of a major phase of work, and you can choose to create these milestones to indicate a big task or a deliverable. So the month of which you want to set your milestones might vary on depending on your project, your organisation, and any other key factors. So the information provided in this section will form up your preferred payment schedule. So information to include on your milestone template. So here is the guidance basically on what to include in your milestones. So please give clear descriptions and deliverables, include the success criteria and costs for each individual milestone, and please don't cluster your milestones together. We need to separate deliverables and costs for each one, which can be quite a lengthy task. So on the screen, you'll be able to see just an example of a milestone. So obviously, milestone, task or activity, deliverable, and then success criteria as well. Again, if you're struggling, the support services are always available to you. So checking your finances are complete. So as obviously the lead applicant, you must check that your finances are complete and correct. So your total costs and funding requests must be in accordance with the competition's eligibility criteria. So for this doesn't apply to this competition, but I'll read it out anyway. For collaborative applications, IFS will highlight to the lead applicant any partners who have any outstanding project finances to complete. So all finances must be included in the application before the lead applicant can submit. So basically, if you haven't completed it, IFS will basically computer says no. So terms and conditions. Before you can submit your application, all organisations within an application must agree to the terms and conditions. So IFS will not let you submit unless you have obviously ticked this box. So before you can submit your application, you must agree to the draft terms and conditions for this procurement competition. So they will differ to any you have agreed to before, and if you are successful in your application, you must sign a final contract with the funding authority, which may include additional details agreed between you and the funding authority. So here is a snazzy little graph, just showing how many applications we receive in the lead up to the deadline for each competition. So customer support can resolve any issues that you might have when submitting, but only if they are contacted within good time and before the deadline, as Callum said. If you will ring us at 2 minutes past 11 and say, my Wi-Fi switched off, that's not a good enough excuse. So you carry the responsibility of ensuring that your application is submitted and completed. And again, the chart shows some of our recent competitions, and the red bar denotes all submissions in the last 3 hours before closing of each competition. So you can tell everybody listens to our advice. So, pros and cons of AI. So when preparing your application, it's important that I share with you some things you should consider if you are planning to use AI to support you. So Innovate UK does not endorse or oppose the use of AI technology. However, we are seeing an increase in the use of AI in applications. So it is necessary that you do your own research as to whether or not this is the right tool for you and consider the pros and cons of using this technology. If you do use it, Innovate UK does not accept any responsibility for any impact on your idea. So whilst AI offers many benefits, it's important that you are aware that you are potentially sharing your idea with the world. So moving on to assessment. Very short section here. So help you understand what happens after you've submitted your application. Innovate UK have produced a series of videos. I placed the link to that playlist in the slide deck. So this slide deck will be available on IFS after today. And I'm not going to run through the videos with you now, but feel free to watch them at your own leisure. So project setup, you will receive a notification explaining next steps if you pass the technical assessment, where you'll proceed to project setup in IFS. So all 8 steps are detailed in your notification, and you must complete this within a maximum of 30 calendar days. There we go. Please be patient during this stage. Assigning MSPs and finance checks completed can take a couple of weeks. And please ensure that you share the T's and C's with your legal team at the earliest possible opportunity. And once notified, you'll have 30 calendar days again to do this. So the final step will be for you to sign and return your grant offer letter, and we must first approve it. And then you will get a go live email confirming you can start your project. So the project will always have a start date on the 1st of the month, as my colleague Ellie said, and you can only claim for costs incurred and paid for after your project has started. So just moving on briefly to additional support. So if you're a small to medium-sized business and a successful applicant, you will be contacted by the Innovate UK Business Growth Team about working with an innovation and growth specialist. So these specialists will focus on helping you to grow your business by accessing the right finance and funding, facilitating connections to potential partners as well, protecting your IP, and access to many other tools to help you scale up and access the global market. So more information about the great work that business growth undertake with our SME community can be found again on the link on the screen. And then here's just some useful information. So useful links to help provide any sort of support that you might need during the application process and beyond. So we highly recommend that you read our general guidance and check out Business Connect's Good Application Guide as well. If you need some help pulling together your collaboration agreement or any sort of documentation, you can contact us and we'll be able to help. And we've also provided some other really useful links to keep you updated and in touch with all of the opportunities that are available. And then I think, we'd like your feedback, please. So if you like, obviously, all of the information that we've run through today, if you feel like we could make it a little bit more succinct and a little bit briefer, break it down a little bit, please do let us know. There's another link on the slide. So please click it, when you're going through this slide deck at your own leisure. And then I think we're now at the Q&A.
So just before Roger goes into this, for the benefit of the room and the recording, we do have a roving mic around. So when you want to ask a question, if you stick your hand up nice and high, and we'll bring it round. But Roger's just got a few things to add before we
I thought I'd preempt a few questions, just because sitting there taking some notes, some observations. First of all, I made a mistake. Callum got the wording right when I said, our aim was to streamline and not avoid a future competition, but avoid a future open competition, okay, which enables us to move much faster. And Callum showed some timescales there, which would have had an extra 6 or 9 months on it if we were going to go through this process again. So that was my mistake. Secondly, Tom, you're up there, aren't you? Yes. I mean, that was brilliant on the SBRI background. There was one slide Tom presented where we've done the work for you in terms of the market and the challenge and so on. No, you've done the work in terms of the consultation our friends in DSIT did on those missions. So that's why, in one sense, why we've defined those missions. So if you can align with a mission, that is shorthand for saying we believe this is useful, we believe there's a market, we believe there's a good challenge here. We believe it's what the government wants. We believe it's what the UK needs. Okay, so exploit those missions. That's why we're going to provide a link to those mission documents. One other point on eligibility, you'll have seen it's very open. But remember, it's going to be assessed, so it's highly competitive. Look at the number of people in this room. I mean, I would think we're probably going to be 2 or 3 times oversubscribed. So eligibility isn't your problem. You've got to be eligible. It's competitive. It's got to be a really good idea. And we also will exercise a portfolio decision, which we always have to, in terms of getting the money to fit what was bid. I had a couple of questions on side. We had, because some of our slides are standard, but there was this issue about making sure we're a UK registered company. Just to be clear, this competition is open to non-UK registered companies, okay? Just in case you're going to ask that. Likewise, we quite often mention project partners and a team. One contract here, not multiple grant offers, okay? Makes life much easier for us. It's not grant funding. It's a contract. We got a lot of questions on this. You're used to, those of you who've done grant funding, for there to being a lot of work on cost monitoring, etc. These projects will be monitored, won't they, Callum? But just remember, and Tom said it brilliantly, in order to, given the whole origins of SBRI, Contracts for Innovation, your project has to be eligible, and we have to understand your costs, and we have to understand the profit or not profit issue, okay? But the payment's going to be against achievement. And the job of monitoring these projects is to make sure you don't stray outside the legal compliant thing you bid, okay? But it is not a cost recovery contract. Just remember that. We need absolute clarity on what we're going to get for our money at each of those milestones. And the better they are, the simpler it is for the project to run. And finally, the IP clauses, and Tom covered that again brilliantly. Now, I'm just going to make a statement. We do have, and you mentioned them, some claim over IP in order to stop this being a subsidy. Where's Murray Reid? I could see Murray around. So people who are kind of financed or doing business elsewhere in the world, there are some investors who will just say, you are not allowed to, in any circumstance, give anybody other than me any rights over your IP. And sometimes those companies can't bid SBRI. And you know what? It's their loss, and okay, and it's our loss as well. And we have this every single time. And they say, we've asked our investors and they want to talk to you and explain why those clauses are wrong. And I go, no, they're right. Because despite this fact, despite the fact that those IP clauses do give certain investors restrictions, we still end up with more projects we can fund than we can fund. Okay, so it differs, all right, it differs, but it is a fundamental tenet of SBRI contracts that in order to not be a subsidy, we have to have those clauses in, okay? So don't even embark on can we give you a quick ring to discuss them, because I've spent a lot of my life doing that. Okay, thank you, Callum. Sorry, I'm going to shut up now. But,
Great, so I guess we'll open the floor to any questions. I think I saw Niall's hand jump up first, so just at the front. I don't know where the roving mic is. Sorry, I'm making life difficult for Anita. Unfortunately, we need it for the recording, so at the front here, Anita.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so understood that the phase 2 can't be, that there can be no information about budgets for phase 2 currently, but for the final deliverable, part of that would be the plans that we would have for a phase 2. So am I right in assuming that during the phase 1, indicative budgets for phase 2 would be made available so that we could provide those plans?
The official answer to that is no, because that will depend on what DSIT come up with and how the response we get from them, and I'm not going to throw Tom under the bus by asking to flesh that anymore. The more subtle answer is you have a roadmap that will cover a period of time on your product. I hope from what we presented today you can get a sense of the ambition of where we're trying to go with this. So I would expect it'd be quite easy to define a threshold. So let's say if you propose, say, we think phase 2 is going to be a 3-year project, this is what we would do in those 3 years, depending on money. If it was a 1 year, this is what we do. But I think that's the kind of thing, and giving an indication of what those costs might be within those threshold periods is important. It will be used to assess you, but if it's wrong because the phase 2 is not what you expected, that won't be the end of the world. We will hold you to the roadmap, and that will be the discussion, if that helps.
Yeah, understood.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to? Just say. No, go, Roger.
I'll come up on stage, all right? How about that? The answer is no, Callum's right, because we want to know what you get for your money to inform the DSIT team and the UKRI team during the planning of the next phase. So we're unashamedly nobbling some really important intelligence here, which is how much it's going to cost to achieve certain things, and that's going into our equations, okay? And I'll come on stage.
I was just going to say, generally, costs for putting together an application for phase 2 are not eligible costs for phase 1, so you can't put that into your phase 1 costs.
Next question. Let's go. I'm going to go to the back of the room in the middle, and I'll try and work my way around different people as well, just to give Anita some extra steps today.
More lunch for me. This up here?
So just straight back in the middle. Sorry, apologies. It's slightly random on my part. It's just who I see the hand go up first for.
Thanks. Could you give us maybe a stronger indication of what your expectations are around the TRL levels at the start and at the end of phase 1?
I mean, the key thing we're going to be talking about is product maturity. The difficulty we haven't specified TRL levels is in part because we are covering multiple sectors here. So we look at the different missions. The TRL. So let's say if you're using the strict definition of saying it's been deployed in a commercial environment as your TRL 9, trying to do that for healthcare is going to be very different for doing it for critical infrastructure. So we've not specified that in that sense. It needs to be relevant to what you're doing. The key thing we are looking for, as we said before, is maturity of concept and maturity of market understanding, and then showing how you can address that. Apologies, I can't really go into specifically. Roger, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
I mean, I'm not a huge TRL fan because it's a way of kind of ducking the product issue. You want to magically assess a TRL to know if something's how mature something is. If it's all TRL 9, Tom won't fund you, will you? All right? Okay. So we need the details. What I'd expect to say is, look, it would be really, really, really good if we could halve the price of this sensor or double the sensitivity of this bit, because that transforms the product or it makes it suitable for this specific application. So the devil's going to be in the detail.
I think your hand went up first. Oh, so we'll go there and we'll come to you next. Sorry. There you go.
Okay. It's a general question about the dreaded IP. When it comes to the deals that the applicant makes with the subcontractor, do you people have any say in what the IP conditions are on those agreements?
I'll let Tom handle this one.
No, so any sort of negotiations or contracts with your subcontractors are up to you.
Entirely free to do whatever we want with IP, publications, all of those things.
Yes, the lead applicant must be doing the majority of work. So the assumption is that the IP, the majority of the IP of the product or service will sit with them.
Okay, thank you.
I think we said down here next.
Yes.
Yes, two questions, but one very brief. Finance, subcontractors, do we, in terms of the subcontractor cost, do we only include, not including their VAT in the overall cost? Does it make sense?
I'm going to hand to one of the competitions people, or Tom, who wants to take this one.
We're talking about avoid double counting, right? Double accounting.
Yeah, do you want to take that or shall I?
Go if you want.
Yeah, so with regards to project costs, obviously, all of the guidance is available on IFS. So if you are struggling with, obviously, VAT and everything like that, please contact us. I'm not going to sit here and give a really in-depth overview on it because I don't know, if I'm completely honest with you. But if you are struggling and you're not sure, please contact the customer support team. But IFS, if you click yes to being VAT registered, it will automatically include your, obviously, your VAT for you, so you haven't got to worry about it. Does that answer your question? No?
It's about the subcontractor cost. But okay, I will. Anyway, it's a complicated issue in a way. We asked those kind of questions before and done a few this SBI before. But
do you want to go?
Yeah, I would say similarly. I'm not quite sure how you do it on the system, but make sure those VAT costs are included.
Okay. Well, anyway, I will follow that up. The second question is more important. It's about the matchmaking support. Is it possible for Innovate or Business Connect to support the pre-competition matchmaking by the missions, so that at least by the missions, so you know who's interested in healthcare, because that's quite easy, a lot easier for people to find partners and all that.
So I would say Business Connect do support on that. You're actually sit next to one of our Business Connect colleagues. There are a few more in the room. But also we also have in the room DSIT side of things, the people who are the specific mission leads, the three missions that outlined, very well connected in the community. So feel free to speak to them as well. There'll be opportunity later on. There are also a room full of people who are interested in these areas. So there may be collaborations to go around here. But yes, there is Business Connect specifically can do. There's also a great opportunity here today by meeting the people in the room. Okay. Oh, we have a mic there. Sorry, and we'll go to further down afterwards. Okay.
My question is regarding terms and conditions. It came up a couple of times in the slides. Are the T's and C's published?
I don't know.
The draft contract will be available once you start your application.
Is there any maximum percentage allowed for subcontractors in the call, or is there anything else? Closer. Is there any maximum percentage allowed for subcontracting in this call, or not?
So the wording we have on the competition brief is the majority of the work should be done by the lead applicant. Within that, subcontract may involve other things than just work, and maybe some materials cost, for example, if they're acting as supplier, that kind of thing. The key thing I would mention is the thing when you're doing the applicant, and I'm going to take this from maybe a slightly more pragmatic point of view than the letter of what through the terms and conditions. But if you're applying for something and the subcontractor is taking the majority of what's going on, well, why they're the subcontractor? It's is okay. What we want from the competition is we want the people who own the product, who own the roadmap, can outline what the investment and the funding, everything else is needed required to get you where you want to go, to be the people who are the lead. So if the subcontractor is delivering, adding all of that, why is the subcontractor not going for it? Obviously, within that, there are details and there are shades. And I think, again, it's hard to say without having specific details in front of us. And it would be, if you want, feel free to reach out in any specific discussions, either at the end of the day or via email. You can come through our either customer service things, or I'm happy to pass on my details. But yeah, so that's kind of speaking around, but the key thing, it should be who's delivering it, who is going to be getting the value of this and driving the product forward, and that's who we want to see.
For us, the question was if there is a founder involved, and typically you can classify it as a material or a subcontract because they deliver something as a physical device, but sometimes in previous Innovate calls, it was classified as subcontracting. So this was my question.
I think it would depend on what they're doing for you. If they're doing development work, then it might be different than if they're doing something routine. Roger, I think you want to...
Yeah, I think this is what I meant by eligibility versus assessment. The benefits to the UK have got to be clear. But so the thing I'd be more... So I fully recognise that even if we're talking to product HQ, as Callum says, a major element may be subcontract because it's a smart chip or whatever, and we fully recognise that, and that's a real product. But what I wouldn't want, for example, is just to have a lead who is badging someone else's product, because we're talking about complex markets where we want to be dealing with the company which is, in the case of, for example, health, would be looking how to get a product certificated or clinical trials or whatever. So, but all of that will come out in, so I go back to times, because our competitions people do such a great job, it's pretty open. I mean, the rules are very clear, it's pretty open, but it's going to be assessed. And the assessors are being asked to see what's the benefit to the UK.
Anita, the next question was down at the front here. Just in the corner, just by the door.
Excellent.
Thank you. A two-part question. The first is a point of clarification. Am I correct in saying that only the successful lead applicants of phase 1 will then be eligible into phase 2?
Yes.
Yep. Now, in terms of subcontractors or project partners, is it only the ones that are named in phase 1 that are then eligible for phase 2? So what I'm thinking is, if you agree to have one subcontractor as part of your phase 1 going into a phase 2, but then after some discussions, you notice that there's somebody else could also be added onto this. Is there flexibility in that?
If I can, I'll start and then hopefully that covers it. Yeah. So I think I will answer this from a strategic point of view rather than kind of the letter. I'm sorry, throw Tom under the bus and give him that one afterwards. I think the key bit would be, well, you as the lead are the person who's applying for the next thing. If you view subcontractors, they're not project partners to be specific, if you change material costs between projects, well, the answer is yes. View subcontractors in the same way. The caveat to that, from my perspective, is if we're talking about a significant subcontractor and they're providing something to the project and they've been a key part of the delivery of the phase 1, if they've gone and something's changed, then that will need to be addressed in the second competition. I mean, it's worth mentioning that the phase 2 details are still yet to be clearly nailed down, but that would be my lean on the strategic perspective. I'll pass to Tom.
I think it'd be unreasonable for the mechanism essentially doesn't say you have to have it all mapped out at stage 1, so there's some flexibility, and I think Callum's covered that relatively well.
So a hand go up at the back. There you go.
Hi, yeah, I think it's the nature of the quantum technology is that it's likely that a lot of these projects will have, the lead will have a number of subcontractors with them, and the ratio of the size of that subcontracting could be significantly different. It could be higher in the phase one than they expect in the phase two, because of the nature of how that technology will develop. And I think there's also an issue with technology at the moment is the lead times in a number of areas for hardware. So I can see issues where the contract's awarded. Once the lead partner is under contract, they've then got to arrange the subcontracting contracts, who then have then got to place the orders for components. So in terms of the timescales to the end of March next year, I can see a number of projects where hardware deliverables are all going to be pushed right to the end and going to be looked at that. I was just wondering what's the view on assessing that, given that this is a primer for much longer projects that people are looking at to mature the technology.
So I'll take the second part of the question first. I think what I would say from it, as an innovation lead who will be sat along these projects, given what we're asking for on these deliverables, I think we're expecting, although these are 50% innovation, so that was the thing I think we wanted to add to the contract innovation, these are specified as 50% innovation. Innovation doesn't necessarily mean building hardware. In the case of a 7-month project, if I was looking at your project plan, assuming it's approved, and all of a sudden, I've got 6-month lead times on my purchasing, I would be very concerned about your project management skills that you have available in that project. I think it's because the amount of time to slip in that. I think the key bit is to focus on actually what we're asking for on the deliverables. We're not asking necessarily completely brand new hardware to be built. We're asking for the performance of the existing technology you've got to the point which you can point to your roadmap and how you can further develop it to be demonstrated. So that may involve iterating on your technology quite quickly or doing some improvements within that. I would be surprised if you're building something from scratch in a 7-month period, if that answers your question. There are always slippages on purchasing within projects, and that unfortunately that is on, we have the bound, as we're bound by budgets, that is on you as the applicant team to consider that when you're applying as well. On the first part of that, I don't know if anyone wants to add anything more to the subcontractor conversation beyond what we've already said.
Let's be really clear. The deliverables for this phase are paper, aren't they, Callum? But we want to see evidence of performance. That doesn't mean that there's going to be a rush at the end of a project to have built something and measure it. Evidence of performance can include stuff which already exists. So let's use as an example the SBRI we ran on the test bed on National Quantum Computing Centre recently. All of those projects from the way they've run, we know there is significant private money going in as well. I've got no worries whatsoever with those projects, whether the companies have spent all of our money. They've, because of the high-profile nature of those products and the ambition of them, we know that we are partially funding and paying for certain deliverables out of something which is a bigger story. I am expecting, I'm not going to change what's in the brief, it doesn't change, I'm not going to change the slides. But that is an underlying expectation on this, is that we're dealing with people who have got product ambition, not just waiting to put together a team and order some bits and plan what they might do, okay? It has to really be, we're joining a story which has probably started already.
Yeah, I think I was just clarifying about that no paper studies part of it, because there will be those hardware issues, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to because I think we wrote that in the out of scope section, what specific and what we mean by that, it needs to be anchored to something that you're actually doing. What we don't want is a literature review saying, well, we think this thing can fit into this performance because we've got this from from academic papers and pointed that out.
So I saw a presentation a few months ago on using Diamond in medical applications, and it was showing wonderful performance curves. And it says, well, the only issue is none of these devices exist yet. All right. So we'd have said we're going to have difficulty believing the credibility of a product like that. So that's why we use the modeling term, which means if you are producing some modeled performance, you're using characteristics of real devices rather than the simulation term, which you say one day someone might be clever enough to make this, in which case we'll have a product. Okay. So we want it anchored in real hardware companies, real performance, real products. We don't just want a simulation of a product which might one day be possible.
Question on the side then. And I think, Anita, there's one at the front table here afterwards. Okay.
So, well, Callum, two questions, I suppose. One is, the stated aim is to accelerate the development and adoption. But I guess my question is, to what extent you expect to see, or do you know whether you expect to see that acceleration of the adoption of an entire system which gets, for example, a sensor out there versus the development of the sensor part itself? And the second question, perhaps I'll come back to, is dual use, and to what extent you expect to see, if there's military end barriers to adoption, for example, whether that fits within the scheme.
I will take the first part to start with. I mean, to say specifically to what Roger's just said and what we're talking about, the overall roadmaps, we're not expecting this to be covering the entire story of what's being done. So there is a larger thing going forward. As I said previously, there's probably a larger roadmap than which is covered by this, and probably by phase 2 as well, because we can't push things right up to the point where they're TRL 9. That's not what Innovate does. So within that, when you're talking about how we talk about the adoption, well, if you're accelerating something to someone who might buy something, then I would view that as accelerated adoption, particularly if the customer is someone who is aligned to one of the missions, and the easy one that jumps towards is the NHS. So if you're pushing something towards, if you've got a product and you're developing that product towards the point where you know you're going to be clinical trials, you know you're going to be pushing through regulation, that makes it much easier to adopt. That doesn't necessarily mean we've got the NHS as part of the project getting ready to buy the product or the system, whatever it is. And so in terms of talking about a systems perspective, yeah, that's fine. I think if you are the product owner and you're selling into a larger system, we would need to understand how that goes forward as well. It can't just be an isolated thing of saying, we think we could use these systems, but we've got no customer we're talking to, no market being defined. Kind of.
I guess it was more along that journey, there are various barriers to adoption, for example, and it's solving the barriers to adoption. Is that part of this call, or are you expecting this call to be more back at the level of, for example, developing the sensor, or is it looking at that, what's the journey and what are the actual barriers there, which will be the things that prevent or accelerate the adoption?
Yeah, so I think we came back to what we spoke about earlier. We want you to identify any barriers to the technical, commercial, regulatory that kind of tend to be the classic ones. But we'd expect those to be on the roadmap as part of that. So yes, by all means, identify those and explain how you're getting around those. On the dual use side of things, I'm going to admit I don't know. So if anyone wants to take
I think
questions.
It would be good to hear from Tom on the input we've had from the MOD onto the missions, for example. But just on this point, I think the other thing we're quite keen on, why is the UK attractive? Because I believe we are very attractive for companies on the brink of launching these products. Part of the attractiveness is access to global markets, and let's hope we don't put up too many barriers to that. The magic step before that, which we've seen, and I know Stuart's here, Department for Transport, and we've seen it on the health side as well. It's embedded in the nature of some of the hubs. It's embedded in the nature of the missions, is the lead customer. And so part of the roadmap we're expecting to say, which is that if customer X can help us with a demonstration of this, then suddenly it unlocks a load of potential. So some of this, I think it's safe to say, isn't it, Callum, that if you, milestones of adoption are as important as technical milestones in this, which is to be able to demonstrate its product suitability in certain applications. Sorry, Tom, do you want to comment on the dual thing?
Yeah, I think just to say that the MOD and DSTL have been really closely involved in shaping the programme, so missions 4 and 5 particularly. And so I'd recommend we can link you up with them just to have a chat about how the barriers that you're foreseeing in your project and the sort of programmatic activity that they're rolling out as well to align with that sort of thing. But
oh, sorry, we had a question at the front. Sorry.
Hi there. My question is about a sentence in the online material. It says that 50% of the work has to be R&D. It's not something I've ever given a lot of thought to before. I've just assumed it's all R&D, but I was wondering if there were any potential banana skins there around work that's not classified as R&D.
I will hand over the this is a classic for people who've done the SBRIs before, and this contract innovation. This is a key part of their terms, but I'll let Tom take this one.
I think, if you've got any concerns, we're happy to, in particular concerns, we're happy to talk about them. It's the idea, as we've said, with the mechanism is to support things through to adoption. So at those later stages, often, there are things which you may want to consider as some of those barriers to adoption, which may be eligible. What's not eligible are things like generating marketing materials or going to conferences, to sell the product. But some commercialization, activity is required to get these things adopted, but that commercialization doesn't count as part of the 50% R&D. So it's a bit of a balance. If there are specific things, then yeah, definitely come and talk to us. But I think it's an acknowledgement that as part of that adoption process, it's not just all about technical R&D. There are other elements that need to go along with the sort of commercialization journey.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, sorry, there we go.
Thank you. For specialist subcontractors, such as the National Standards Body, is there a limit on how many projects we can be involved in?
I don't think so, is my honest answer to that. I don't know if anyone's got any other input to that.
I mean, I don't think there's any built-in limit to how many times a subcontractor. Remember, I mean, the subcontractor word is slightly. We keep popping into collaborative funding models. We're talking to suppliers or agencies which are going to have to be involved in a project. As ever, though, we see everything being bid in, and we are always sensitive when claims are being made about what can be done by capacity. But that would be the only limitation. But we wouldn't necessarily have the visibility of that, to be honest.
Are there any last chance of questions in the room? As we said, we'll have a applicant surgery opportunity after lunch as well for people to go through. But if there's no more questions in the room, going once, going twice, okay, that's it. I think we can end the recording here, and I'll just say thank you to the panel for answering the questions, and then we'll break for some opportunity for discussion on the table and to meet, as to go for the question earlier, to meet people from DSIT and any other stakeholders in the room you might want to chat to. Thank you, everyone.